Go right, Chairman Silva. I think we're ready, yes. You'll be first.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I would like to call to order the December 12, 2018 meeting of the Committee on Finance, Audit, and Budget. Will the Secretary call the roll, please?
Yes, Reverend Miller. Mr. Irvine. Here. Ms. Alvarez-Rosales.
Here.
Mr. Peterson.
Here.
Mr. Youngblood.
Here.
Chairman Silva.
Here.
Reverend Patterson is out of the country and will not be here today, but we have a quorum with 6 members of the committee present.
Our first order of business is the approval of the committee minutes of the November 14, 2018. May I have a motion to approve a second?
So moved. Second.
Will the Secretary call the roll?
Yes. Reverend Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Irvine.
Yes.
Ms. Arabelle, you were out last month, right?
I was out,
Right.
so.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Youngblood.
Yes.
Chairman Silva.
Here.
Yes, we have.
Yes. Sorry.
The motion passes with 5 yes votes and 1 abstention.
Our next order of business is the review of the finance report. Jeremy Fine. Good morning, Jeremy.
Good morning. I'm Jeremy Fine, your Chief Financial Officer, and I'll be reviewing the October results. With regard to October revenues, we continue to see progress with regard to fare and pass totals, and particularly on passes. But as we talked about in last month's meeting, we continue to see good progress on pay-per-use ridership, as we go into the fall months, and we see that here again in October with fare box totals just slightly off of budget estimates. Passes continue to do very well for us. The 7-day and 30-day pass in particular are the bulk of the 1.8 positive variance that we're seeing. So that leads us to a 1.5 million positive variance to budget for the month of October with regard to fare and pass totals. Reduced fare subsidy is down 1.2, again due to the haircut imposed by the state back in 2015. Non-fare box totals are up to budget about 1.3 million. That is primarily due to non-capital grant revenues. And so that leaves us with a total positive variance to budget of 1.6. So we're very excited about the positive variance to budget on the revenue side for the month of October. And then we see free rides slightly higher than where we were this time last year. With regard to year-to-date numbers for revenue, we see a somewhat similar trajectory on fare box and passes. Fare box down as we would have expected with the fare increase imposed in 2018, but that is more than compensated by the increase in pass revenue. Again, people novating from pay-per-use over to passes for the year, as we saw as well in the month of October. So we see fare and pass totals up about $4 million on a year-to-date basis. The reduced fare subsidy is down approximately $12 million, and non-fare box totals down slightly over $1 million, which leaves us a total revenue on a year-to-date basis of down just about $9 million, $9.2 million for the year. And then we see free rides approximately 1.1 million less than where we were on a year-to-date basis last year. We're more than offsetting the drag on a year-to-date basis with regard to expense controls, but the October results, the positive results on revenue is coupled with a positive result on expenses. As you see here, the labor line, we're slightly unfavorable, but again, on an apples-to-apples basis, if we were to compare, without the ATU increase, we would actually be in positive territory. The material line is slightly favorable, as is fuel. Power is essentially flat, but with some slight negative variance. And then security services is essentially flat with some slight favorable variance. And then again, the bulk of the positive favorability comes from the other expense line, where we see over $2 million of favorability. So that leaves us for the month of October a total operating expense favorability of almost $1.9 million. If you couple that with the positive result that we saw on the revenue side. For the month of October, we see a total net favorability of $3.5 million. On a year-to-date basis, again, the vectors for the particular line items are similar. We see labor unfavorable, but again, if you were to take into account the ATU contract, we would be essentially flat, if not slightly favorable. Material, fuel, and power all have some favorability. Security services and injuries and damages coming in essentially flat. And then other expenses, over $32.5 million of favorability on that line. That leaves us with almost $12.5 million of favorability on a year-to-date basis for our expenses. Again, coupled with the positive favorability that we saw on the revenue side, offsetting most of the drag that we saw on the revenue side, that leaves us with a positive favorability on a year-to-date basis of $3.2 million. So again, we were about $300,000 unfavorable on a year-to-date basis as of the end of last month. So again, at the end of October here, we see us breaching into positive favorability on a net basis of revenues versus expenses for the year. So again, we hope to continue to see this trend as we continue on through the months of November and December. But again, we're excited to see that transition from the negative variance that we've been seeing on a year-to-date basis so far, and now again seeing that breach over to where we're in positive territory for the year. For the three commodities that we purchase, fuel, power, and natural gas, we have made all of the purchase amounts that we need to for the upcoming 2019 year. We continue to make selective purchases for the outer years on all three commodities as prices avail themselves. So we're looking to start purchasing fuel for 2021, and we'll look to make selective purchases in the outer years for natural gas. And as we talked about in the last meeting, we've been able to lock in at very favorable prices for our electricity power needs through 2022. So we were excited about that result as well.
Any questions?
Jeremy, just a statement. I know, so today is December 12th. Does the November numbers show a similar trend both on the expense side and the revenue side as what we're seeing in October? I mean, there's a lot of green for the first time, in terms of the month of October. If you take a look at, there are two things that really we have no control over. One would be the money that we get from the state, and the other one was a decision made at the federal level. Mm-hmm. So if you take those two things out, as you said, we either have a surplus or we're flat. Mm-hmm. But even with those two things kind of going forward, if you look at November numbers, are there similar trends in terms of both on the expense and the operating side?
So we're still closing the books, but we do expect there to be a similar trend. Just to dampen expectations a little bit, as we entered into November, we did have a substantial snow/ice event, which does increase our operating expenses and does decrease our operating revenues, system-generated revenues with those types of events. But again, we see that the general trend will continue in November. But October was particularly robust because of the good weather that we experienced through most of that month.
Okay. And just the last thing for me, it's a small number, but if you go to the commodity page, the last page, the $58,000 negative variance, what was that?
So some of that is just due to the way that we spread the budget. So it was just a small variance in the actual usage on the power side vis-a-vis, where we had estimated on, for the budget purposes.
Okay.
So Jeremy, even with the 3.2 in surplus, and kudos to you guys, I mean, outstanding job that you and your team have done, because I guess from a couple of months prior, it didn't look too dire for us to meet budget, and now all of a sudden we got a surplus, which is great. Does that include the real estate transfer tax and the sales tax, or we could be looking at more revenue streams?
It does not include the public funding that we receive. So, as of right now, we are seeing a positive variance for the real estate transfer tax, albeit that is a very volatile tax, so it swings around quite a bit from month to month, depending on sales, not only on residential sales, but on large properties in the loop that really drive, an outshare of the value created through the real estate transfer tax. So again, as of, the latest receipts of real estate transfer taxes, we are in positive territory. We're slightly down for the PTF per budget expectations and essentially flat for sales tax. So while we are talking about some positive variance, whether it be on the system-generated revenues or on the public funding revenues, again, we're on the razor's edge, and just slightly positive with some very tough decisions with regard to belt tightening that we've been able to implement. But there's not enough rabbits in the hat, so to speak, to continue that into perpetuity. So it's very important for us to continue to receive all of the revenues that we have historically gotten from the state, whether it's from the reduced fare reimbursement, the haircuts on the public transportation funds, the PTF funding, or the fact that we've not gotten a capital bill from the state since 2009. So all of those factors still are in play. Again, we appreciate the hard work from the departments and allowing us to be able to squeeze enough out of the expense controls, and we're excited about some of the revenue, trends. But again, it's very critical for us to continue to receive all of the state funding, both on the operating side and the capital side, as we move forward.
Any other questions? No more questions?
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
Keep it up. Our next order of business is the review of an ordinance authorizing lessee Wilson Yard Development LLC to sublease to Floral Park Realty Management Inc. property improved by parking located between Monrose and Wilson Avenue. Ms. Carol.
Good morning. Carol Morey, Chief Infrastructure Officer. So this item involves a sublease between Wilson Yard Development LLC and Floral Park Realty Management for parking located between Montrose and Wilson Avenues adjacent to and under the elevated structure. So CTA has an existing ground lease with Wilson Yard Development LLC, which was approved by the Chicago Transit Board in November of 2005 in connection with the redevelopment of the Wilson Yard site. The purpose of the ground lease was to provide parking for the development. Any sublease under the ground lease requires the consent of the Chicago Transit Board, which consent cannot be unreasonably withheld. Floral Park Realty Management is the owner of Wilson Yard 4400 LLC, which recently acquired the property adjacent to the parking area. The property includes 25,000 square feet of retail shops and storefronts located at grade in the Wilson Yard development, and includes retail tenants such as AT&T, PNC Bank, Hair Cuttery, Subway, Weight Watchers. You get the picture. Wilson Yard Development LLC will continue to be responsible for payment of rent and expenses under the ground lease. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Any questions? Any questions?
Thank you.
If there are no further questions, may I have leave to place this item on the omnibus for approval?
So moved. Second.
Our final order of business is the review of 8 purchase and sales award recommendations. Presenter is Ellen McCormick,
Good morning.
Chris, Juan Pablo. This morning we will go slightly out of order and consider first the 3 RPM contracts which are A1, A2, and A3. The staff will make a presentation of
And
these three.
maybe we should start off, everybody should introduce themselves first, then you can start your presentation.
Chris Bouchel, your Chief RPM Officer.
Juan Pablo Prieto, Senior Manager, Diversity Programs.
Ellen McCormick, Vice President, Purchasing and Supply Chain.
So today I'd like to start with a brief summary of RPM. You've heard some disparate pieces of it as I've reported over the past board meetings, but I'd like to kind of put it all together into a couple of slides. So you've got 5 bullet points up here. The first one is a separate project, the Broadway substation. Of course, for this vital section of infrastructure that we're improving, the Broadway substation provides will provide increased power capacity and reliability. The other 4 elements are all included in the major design build contract, which we'll be presenting shortly. They include pre-stage work. While this is sort of a mystery as a title, it's really the preparatory work that's required to start some of the major construction, in particular with regard to the signaling system, and in particular with regard to the improvement work that we're going to be doing at the Lawrence to Bryn Mawr modernization section. So as you know, this section starts north of Wilson and goes to north of Bryn Mawr, and not only replaces or improves the viaduct in that area, but it also breaks up, it modernizes the stations and breaks up the largest block of inaccessible stations that we have with accessible ones. So there are 4 stations that get built in that area as well. The other element is to the south and just north of the Belmont station, south of Addison, which is a bypass that smooths traffic through a key junction and will ultimately be responsible for increased throughput in this area, as well as increased throughput in this area and increased capacity on the system overall. And then finally, one of the most significant elements of this project are the signal improvements. So we're replacing a signal system that was installed in the 70s. With a modern system that will improve throughput through this entire area. And that work goes with a bigger footprint just south of Howard, all the way to just south of the Belmont station. If we can go to the next slide, you've heard, again, different pieces of this in the presentations over the last couple of months. We are in the midst of doing property demolition. This demolition is generally in areas where we're going to be installing structure or components of the structure in the future. The advanced utility work does the same basic thing. So as we're clearing out these buildings, we also need to move some of the utilities. The principal utilities that we're moving are ComEd power lines, which would conflict with the position of either the bypass or the structure in the Lawrence to Bryn Mawr modernization section. In addition, the Broadway substations we've talked about, a key capacity. If we improve the signals, we improve the stations. We have to make sure that the trains have power through that area. And then finally, the consideration today for the board of several contracts, 3 contracts actually, 2 new contracts and an amendment that are key to the RPM project and its success. To give you an idea of the phase 1 and its schedule, we are hoping to issue, pending your approval, a notice to proceed early in 19, followed by design work. 19, this is a design build contract, and as such, the major activities in 19 are really related to the contractor completing that design. We would expect to see in late 19 that some of the advanced work, the pre-stage work, if you will start. In 2020, the bypass will begin in earnest, and the project will reach substantial completion in 2025. The outreach for this has been underway. We have a small team, but very dedicated. They have been out on a number of different issues. We have been talking about DBE opportunities throughout the city. This is a city-wide project. While the work occurs on the northern end of the red line, the opportunities are for the entire city. Similarly, for the workforce, we have been out talking about workforce development opportunities that are inherent in this contract. And then on a more focused basis, we've been talking to the community about those opportunities as well, but also the impacts of construction, both to their ridership as well as their day-to-day lives. And, we feel in general that this kind of stakeholder engagement is really critical to our success. We've also talked a little bit about transit-oriented development opportunities that will occur at the back end of this project. And generally, we've been very well received by the communities, both outside and inside the footprint. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Juan Pablo Prieto, who will head of our diversity effort, who will talk about some of the ways that we're maximizing DBE participation and workforce development in this contract.
Thank you, Chris. Before I talk to you about the commitments made specifically on the contract, I did want to highlight some of the strategies that we've implemented into the contract, and these strategies are building off of the successes that we've had in prior contracts, really starting with Red Line South and developing from there. So the first strategy that we implemented to maximize DBE participation was splitting the goal between a design goal and a construction goal. This was an effort to make sure that professional services companies, DBEs, had an opportunity to participate on the contract. So the DBE goal for the design build was 20% design and 20% construction. We also included our diversity outreach plan, which you've heard about in other contracts, as part of the RFP and was evaluated during the evaluation process. We also launched a mentor-protege program, of which there is participation in this contract. And the reason we launched that program is we wanted to give an opportunity for DBEs to grow in both capacity and capability, and we know that this is one of the programs that helps to do that. In order to gain public participation in our goal-setting process, we also submitted a project-specific goal for this project to the FTA, and that was presented to you earlier this year. We also expanded our outreach into the M and WBE community. We wanted to expand the pool of DBEs that would be eligible to participate on this project to make sure that we were setting an attainable goal. So we went out and talked to M and WBEs about DBE certification and to the assist agencies to make sure they understood the effort that we were trying to accomplish. We hosted small business workshops here at CTA and at these assist agencies to make sure that DBEs understood how to do business with CTA and how to get certified. And all the proposers that submitted proposals for the design build held extensive outreach during the proposal phase. In terms of work,
certification needs to be MWE or
no, for DBE. So there were a group of MWBEs that are not DBE certified. So we went out to that community to make sure that they knew about DBE certification and how to get certified.
Did you see an increase in that?
We did see an increase, not only here at CTA, but the other certifying agencies in the UCP. We also have done extensive outreach in terms of workforce development. We are trying to develop a pipeline for training, apprenticeship, and jobs on this project to meet or exceed the goals that we've set up on this project. And again, these are successes, building on the successes that we established in Red Line South with the WIA goal, which is now our WIOA goal. We've also established two other goals. So the goals on the RPM Design Build contract, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, also known as WIOA, has a 10% of the total labor hours. The economically disadvantaged area goal is 35% of the total labor hours, and the union apprentice goal is 15% of the total labor hours. Recognizing that we have a part to play in making sure the contractor meets these goals, we've been talking to trade unions, workforce assist agencies, and our transit peers to ensure that we're implementing the best practices on this project.
All right, so just going over the suite of contracts that you'll be considering. Design Build contract, which is a new contract award. You will be considering for award the largest construction contract in CTA's history. It is a design build. This allows several advantages. One of them is that the contractor can begin working on construction while they're still completing the design. And in general, this design procurement, the design build procurement contributes to the delivery of a quality project. We have been using design build for nearly a decade. We were one of the first agencies, if not the first agencies, transportation agencies, to use design build as a tool to improve delivery and quality. The second new contract that you'll be considering is the owner's rep contract. This is a construction manager who will be monitoring day-to-day construction activity for the CTA. And then finally, an amendment to the preliminary engineering consultant. This is really our main technical assistance for this project and has helped us tremendously through the environmental process, through the procurement process, and now in the initial stages of design. They've been an excellent partner, and we look forward to that amendment. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Ellen McCormick, who will talk a little bit more about the individual procurements.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'd like to speak to you this morning about the procurement process for all three of the RPM projects. So I'm going to begin with the design build services contract for the Red Purple Modernization Phase 1 project. Due to the nature of this project and the high level of contractors we wanted to attract, the CTA hired a consultant to advise us on the procurement best practices for mega projects, which we incorporated into our procurement. This procurement followed an enhanced two-step procurement, best value procurement process. The first step was the issuance of a request for qualifications, which was advertised on June 9, 2017. The CTA received 3 responses from highly qualified respondents that included local, national, and international firms. All 3 respondents were shortlisted and were invited to submit responses to the request for proposals, or RFP. The second step of the procurement was the issuance of the draft RFP on December 30th, 2017, and the final RFP, which was sent to the shortlisted proposers on April 30th, 2018. During this time period, the proposers were also invited to meet with CTA staff to present alternative technical concepts, offering innovative suggestions for CTA's approval or rejection. Prior to bid submission, the purchasing department established review teams consisting of subject matter experts to evaluate the technical, diversity and workforce development, and financial sections of the proposals. The purpose of the teams was to have subject matter experts review the proposals and present their findings to the evaluation committee members. Each proposal was evaluated on the following 6 criteria: project management, design, construction, team and personnel experience, community impacts, and diversity and workforce development. Based on the presentations of the review teams, as well as their own analysis, the evaluation committee assigned ratings to each of the aforementioned criteria. After the evaluation committee completed its ratings of each proposal, they were briefed by the financial review team on the strengths and weaknesses of each of the financial proposals. In accordance with the terms of the RFP, the evaluation committee then ranked the proposals from 1 to 3 based on the combination of price and technical factors, with 1 being the proposer who presented the best value to the CTA. The evaluation committee then submitted their ranking to me as Vice President of Purchasing for my concurrence. I concurred with the ranking by the evaluation committee because they selected the proposer that proposed both the highest ranked technical proposal along with the lowest price proposal, which represents the best value to the CTA as defined in the RFP. Not only did the recommended proposal receive the highest technical rating, including diversity and workforce development, but they were also substantially lower in price than other proposers. The recommended proposal was 29% lower than the next highest technically rated proposal and 23% lower than the firm that received the lowest technical rating. Furthermore, the highest ranked proposer committed to completing the work in 223 fewer days than the maximum allowed under the RFP. This will minimize the impact on the surrounding communities as well as our buyers. This was a long and intricate procurement, and many people throughout the CTA participated in the procurement process, whether it was as an advisor, a participant on the various review teams, or as a member of the evaluation committee. The CTA fielded 944 questions and attended 31 meetings with the proposers. The departments that contributed their expertise were RPM, infrastructure, finance, law, communications, diversity, and planning, as well as purchasing. I would like to personally thank John Reinitz, Director of the Purchasing Department, and Maria Williams, Purchasing Senior Manager of Capital Construction and Rolling Stock, for their work on this procurement. Maria was not only in charge of this procurement, but was also the CTA's designated representative. Maria's professionalism, dedication, and teamwork was responsible for ensuring that this mega project ran smoothly and efficiently. Based upon all of the aforementioned information, I am recommending that you approve the award of the Design-Build RPM contract to Walsh Floor Design-Build Team JV as the proposer who presented the best value to the CTA.
Any questions?
Yes.
Go ahead, please.
So starting, and Chris, this kind of gets back to your early presentation. When you take a look at the project, a lot of the early work that's going to take place in 2019 is really professional service. It's going to be in the professional service space. I know so often when we start to talk about DBE participation, everyone sort of focuses on the construction side. But in terms of the work that's going to be completed in 2019, what do we have in place really to kind of, one, monitor and audit the DBE participation? Because what I like to do is maybe every 6 months, just kind of report back to the board. So I think it kind of keeps, you know, those firms that are doing the professional service work on their toes to know that the board wants to see a report every 6 months to make sure, you know, because this is 5 years. 5 years is a long time. And again, FY19 is going to be mostly professional service, as you said, as a design build. So I want to just make sure that they're aware of the fact that we want, you know, you guys to check in every 6 months with us and let us know how they're doing in terms of their commitments when it comes to DBE. And that's why I said, what is management going to do from a monitoring and sort of an auditing standpoint to make sure that they're keeping their word in terms of what they're saying that they're committing to?
Well, I'll start off with that. You know, as the primary manager of the project, you know, DBE monitoring, workforce compliance monitoring is not a periodic activity. It's something we do every day. It's built into many of the service contracts that we work on in RPM and ultimately assist diversity in processing information. But the raw information always comes out of basic actions that are occurring on the field of work, right? On the design field or on the field of construction. So getting day-to-day information about what's occurring and then reinforcing that in particular, Terry, with information that comes through pay applications, and then working very closely with diversity to give them that information, plus any other intel that we're getting from the field in the course of our extensive reviews. So, of course, the thrust of the technical side is to review the documents as they're coming in for compliance with the design criteria. But as we're reviewing that, we're pulling off information and ultimately feeding into the diversity monitoring effort, which is really a daily effort. So that said, I'll kind of turn it over to JP in terms of the specifics of how they're using that data to give you reports every 6 months.
Thanks, Chris. Mr. Chairman, to answer your question, we're going to monitor RPM like we monitor every other contract. We have a diversity management system where we can monitor prompt payment. We'll be doing site visits to ensure that the DBEs are performing work and make sure that they're performing work independently, like the regulations state. Recognizing that this is not your typical project that we have here at CTA, we will have dedicated compliance staff that will be reviewing specifically the RPM project.
Mr. Chairman, also in response to your question or your request to make sure the board is being kept in the loop, I will work with staff as part of the construction report, which now also incorporates RPM, as part of that monthly report that we're providing the appropriate data around these issues as part of our monthly update to you as part of the construction report.
Can you give us more color in the process to identify the preliminary engineering consultant?
Yeah, well, like any professional services, hewing to the federal standards, we work with procurement on an LIQ and look predominantly at qualifications. But that said, I can kind of turn it over to Ellen to talk a little bit more about the specifics of the LIQ.
I'm sorry, are you talking about the owner's representative?
No, the preliminary engineering consultant.
Oh, that, amendment to the TY
Yeah.
Lynn.
Yeah, understanding this is an amendment, and they were selected some time ago based on their qualifications.
Okay.
So this is an amendment to the contract?
It's an amendment.
Yes. So RPM, the RPM department approached the purchasing department and asked us to negotiate a contract amendment with TY Lynn. Purchasing reviewed the justification for the amendment, and we were satisfied with the rationale that at this point it's critical to maintain TY Lynn because of all the work that they've done thus far, and this work is going to carry through to 2021 during the design phase. So at this point, it was critical that they maintain TY Lynn. I did have the assurances from Chris, once that phase is over, we'll be able to go out and competitively procure any other services we need in this area.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
You know, I wanted to mention kind of big picture that, and I know I mentioned it yesterday to a few of you, that when you're looking at the city, this project will come, and then we've got airport and the Obama project. So we've got some huge projects, and the work that we're doing now here, you know, kudos, because it's very important to get more DBEs involved and grow that. With regards to workforce also, I mean, our project is going to come early, but the development of that workforce will also impact those other two projects, because there's a talk that there might not be enough workforce. So when we're looking at workforce, and I know the question of DBE was very important, and you mentioned workforce, but the monitoring of that, and I guess the question to make sure that it's a diverse workforce, that when we're looking that we're, you know, even though we're concentrating on some of those communities, that we're working with a number of different groups as well, maybe some that we haven't worked with as much in the past, so that we're making sure, because we want that workforce to be as large of a pool as possible, to come from as many communities. So it's kind of preparing the city for some of these other projects that are coming.
Yes, and we're working with a number of assist agencies and transit peers to make sure that we implement the best practices. Also, the economically disadvantaged area goal that we established encompasses 1.1 million Chicago residents. So not just, like Chris said, although the work is taking place on the North Branch of the Red Line, this will be a project that affects the entire city.
And we'll get that as part of the reports that you're giving us with the
Yes, we use a software to collect certified payroll to ensure that the labor, that we're collecting the numbers according to the goals that we established, and we'll have updates for you regularly.
Okay, thank you.
And JP, as a part of that, when we were talking about the DBE, what piques my interest is the mentoring of some of those subcontractors, because a lot of the times they don't have the skill set for some of the work that is being developed. So I think that's another crucial element when we get projects of this nature. And Walsh is a huge contractor with all the experience and expertise, that they are implementing some type of development plan for these subcontractors so they can be a part of that diversified workforce.
Yes, and we actually have a slide up here with Walsh Floor's commitments. So as I said earlier, we established a 20% design, 20% construction goal, and the commitment that came in from Walsh Floor on the design side was a 20.64% DBE participation commitment. They committed to the 20% construction, although that will come at a later phase after design is done. They'll begin identifying trade work packages, and they'll work closely with us to host outreach events so that DBEs know when those opportunities are available. As part of the DBE commitment, they did commit to 7 mentor-protege plans, 5 of which are on the professional services side, 2 of which currently are on the construction side. And our mentor-protege program is designed to increase the capabilities of a firm. So if they want to grow in the area of expertise that they have, this is a program that is designed to do that. And you know, these successes are no short effort of the diversity team, especially Chandra Watson-Wilson, who's in charge of our outreach and small business development, and China Hampton, who's in charge of our workforce initiatives, and also Siobhan Moore, in charge of our certification unit. They all accompanied, we all went as a team to these outreach events across the city to make sure that everyone heard the same message, and that everyone was able to ask the questions they needed to ask to make sure that they were prepared to participate on this project. In terms of the workforce goals, the Walsh floor team has committed to meeting the workforce goals that we've established, and they've already begun conversations with trade unions and the assist agencies that will help them meet these goals.
Have they ever done mentor protege before? Do you know?
Not with CTA, but
But
they
they've
have
done
done.
other projects?
Yes.
And then the length of the mentor protege is how long? Is it the length of the project, or is it a different timeline?
It depends on each firm, depending on what they're trying to grow with each firm. It could be the life of the project, or it could be shorter, depending on what aspect of the business they're trying to grow. So we'll look at each plan and review it.
So I've got a follow-up. It's probably a two-part question. So it's a follow-up to something that Director Rosales said in terms of talking about the DBE or the workforce participation. Chris, you mentioned this is probably one of the largest contracts we've ever given out in the history of CTA. So I'm assuming that every contractor put their best foot forward and they put their best people forward. Were you given a list of team members who would be working on this project, both when it comes to who you're recommending from the design build contract as well as the owner's rep contract? Were you given a list of, because everyone always wants to put forward their A team, so I just want to make sure you were given a list, or I'm asking the question, were you given a list of people who would be the lead both on the design build contract as well as the owner's rep contract?
Yes, and the key positions that we identified cannot be switched out unless we approve it.
That was the second part of my question, is making sure, because just kind of following up more so, besides the workforce piece, there's about $35 billion worth of projects in the pipeline over the next 10 years in this city. So you take what O'Hare's getting ready to do, everybody's gonna run out there for that 8-point-something billion. You take the 78 that Related is doing. You take all of these projects that are about to come online. If we don't have language that says, guess what, you can't present the A team and get the contract, and then once you get going on the contract, we get a B, or, you move them to other projects. I just want to make sure we've got, and that's really going to be important. Again, with $35 billion worth of projects over the next 10 years in the pipeline. This is not projects people are thinking about. These are actual projects that are going to happen. We've got to make sure, one, the workforce piece, that we've got a diverse workforce that's representative of all the city. But the other part of it is that the people who are the lead on this project for us over the next 5 years, that they continue to be the folks that we're dealing with day in and day out on this project.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions?
Can you talk a little more about the construction components that are making this faster and less expensive?
Well, in the creation of the RFP, we looked for many areas of innovation, and Ellen talked specifically about the ATC process. The successful proposer aggressively used that process to introduce some new technology to the CTA, in any case, relative to structure. And that technology will enable us to deliver the project at a lower cost and at a shorter duration. That ATC process in a project this large was critical to bringing in industry-wide innovation. We've done a lot of big successful projects before, but generally speaking, they have been reconstructing older things. This is really the first time we're looking forward to building something for the next 100 years, and we wanted the best minds of the industry in the procurement. So we created purposely areas where we were willing to innovate with the contractors. The structure of the system was one of them, as well as project logistics. So we saw a lot of innovation being introduced. My staff had to really stretch and go in great detail with the contractor over their proposals to make sure it represented the best interest of our operations group, of our customers, to improve safety and service over the length of the project.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to take a moment here to just give a general comment about the procurement process that we engaged in and the results that came out of it. When we started this process, I pretty much tasked my staff to, one, bring a level of competition to the work that we wanted to do, two, to be innovative in our thinking around how we move forward with this project, and three, if possible, bring in some new players into the market who have not historically pursued projects of this type. We engaged in a procurement process that was very unique to us, one that we had really never done before, based on the advice and the best practices that were given to us by our consultants. As you know, in any bureaucracy like ours, doing something different is challenging. But I have to say that I couldn't have been happier with the results. Not only did we end up with a top-notch team in Walsh and Floor being an international construction company that we've never done business with before, but that has taken on major capital construction projects around the world. They brought a level of innovation to the conversation that allowed us to rethink the way that we pursued a project like this. And I think at the end of the day, not only is it going to be fiscally beneficial to CTA, but it's also going to be beneficial to the communities that are being impacted by this project. That would not have been possible if it weren't for the dedication of the teams that worked on this and their commitment to bring in a quality contractor to work in a quality way on a project that's probably, as you pointed out, one of the biggest projects in the history of CTA, and one that's going to have a lasting impact on the city for decades to come. And so I want to personally thank my procurement staff, my engineering staff, the RPM team, and particularly my diversity team for not only working diligently to bring you a quality recommendation, but also for the work that they're about to undertake to deliver this project on time and within budget, consistent with our history of taking on capital projects of this magnitude. I am looking forward to being in a position to report to the board on this on a regular basis, to keep you up to date on the progress as this moves forward. And I'm also really looking forward to the benefits that we're going to give to the communities that we serve around this project. Terry, as you know, as I've gone around and talked about this project, and you have done the same, we have made the point that although this project is being built on the north side of the city, the benefits of this project will impact the entire city. We are committed to that. The workforce development goals and the DBE goals that we establish are intended to execute and implement that expectation. And I'm looking forward to being able to give you the type of feedback as this project moves forward that shows that the community as a whole is benefiting from a project that's going to have a lasting impact over a number of years as we move it forward.
Dorval, if I could just add, one of the things that I was happy to see in terms of the information provided to board members, happy with the DBE goals, but the other thing that I was excited is that if you look at the contractors, you not only looked at their past performance in terms of their commitments, but the fact that they exceeded those commitments. And again, while I'm happy with the numbers of what they're proposing, again, I always consider these numbers to be the floor. And so when who you're proposing that we approve today, they've always exceeded those numbers. I would hope that when I see some of the team members in the room from the proposed contractors, companies that we would approve today, so I want them to hear that from the board, that we're thankful with the numbers that you've put forth in terms of what you will do. But again, we consider these numbers to be the floor. And in the past, they've exceeded those numbers, and we would hope that they would exceed the numbers again on this project, which is so important to this city.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. And we will move to contract number A1. Any questions? The DBE participation in this contract, okay, what is it, A1?
So this contract was identified for our small business program, so it was set aside for only small businesses to compete on. And the small business that's being awarded the contract is also a DBE, so it'd be 100% DBE participation.
Thank you. Any questions? Let's move to contract number D1. Any questions? Help me understand, okay, what was the process that we follow, okay, in this D1?
Okay, the procurement process, so this was an LIQ. It's a request of letters of interest and qualifications. The LIQ was advertised on March 29th, 2018, and the responses were due on May 23rd, 2018. The CTA received 2 responses. Both respondents were evaluated on the qualifications of their key personnel, the experience of the firm on similar projects, and their approach to completing the scope of work. The diversity outreach plans of each respondent were evaluated by the Diversity Department, and they each received bonus points based on their outreach plans. After the bonus points were added to their respective scores, negotiations commenced with the firm that was ranked the most qualified. The negotiations were concluded successfully. Based upon the aforementioned information, we're recommending award to the most qualified respondent, HNTB Corporation.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just in terms of by selecting this contractor, I know this is going to require a lot. This will almost be, when we talk about from 95th to 130th, this will almost be, what, $1 billion, $2 billion project the moment that we do it. By selecting this contractor and approving this today, how closer does this get us to the point of being in the queue to go after federal money? I know we've got to have maybe a 60% local match, and hopefully with a capital bill, we'll be able to do some of that. But how does selecting this contractor today and approving this, where does this put us in terms of the next step of being able to get federal money, get this project underway in terms of this extension?
So I'm Mike Conley, your Chief Planning Officer. This contract is for program management services, and in essence, this contractor will become a staff extension for CTA's planning, engineering, and preparation staff as we set this project up to enter that competition for those scarce federal dollars in the future. So this moves us forward, so we'll have the staffing to be able to prepare the materials, including the environmental work and the preliminary engineering that needs to be done to move us into that federal process.
And what would the timing, do you think, in terms of, is it 2020 would be?
This is a 3-year contract, and we
Okay.
would hope to be in a position 3 years from now to be able to start moving into that federal program.
Got it,
Okay.
okay.
Any other questions? Let's move to contract number E1. Any questions? If there are no questions, let's move to contract G1. Any questions for G1? So finally, will be contract number H1. Any questions?
I'm sorry, going back to G1, so is that the last extension we're looking at on that one, and then we're gonna?
We certainly are counting on that. We did go out for bid twice on this. The first time we received one proposer, so we went back out for bid, and the second time, both firms took exceptions. So we need this extension. IBM will only issue the new pricing when it comes close to the contract termination. So that's why we had to issue this extension to get that time. We will use that time to go out and procure another vendor, but also it won't take us a year, but we need that year because we won't get pricing from IBM until close to contract extension. So it is our intention that this will be the last one.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? If there are no further questions, may I have leave to place these 8 contracts on the omnibus for approval?
So moved.
Second.
Since there is no further business to come before this committee, may I have a motion to recommend board approval of the omnibus?
So moved.
Will Secretary call the roll, please?
Yes, Reverend Miller.
Yes.
Ms. Irvine.
Yes.
Ms. Alva Rosales.
Yes.
Mr. Peterson.
Yes.
Mr. Youngblood.
Yes.
Chairman Silva.
Yes.
The motion is approved with 6 yes votes.
May I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. How about
You got a minute? Ready, Greg?
If Arabelle's here, we're ready, sir.
All right. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'd like to call to order the regular scheduled meeting of Chicago Transit Board of December 12, 2018. Would the secretary call the roll?
Yes, Reverend Miller. Here. Ms. Irvine.
Here.
Ms. Alvarez.
Here.
Reverend Patterson is not here today. Mr. Silva.
Here.
Mr. Youngblood.
Here.
Chairman Peterson.
Present.
We have a quorum with 6 members of the board present.
Thanks, Greg. The next agenda item is public comment. Greg?
Yes, we have 2 public comment speakers. Ms. Beach, would you like to please step up to the, you can leave your stuff right there, it's fine. And Mr. Demzik, would you like to step up as well? And we'll start with Ms. Beach since she had contacted me first. And our rules and regulations limit public comment speakers to 3 minutes, so please try to keep yourself brief. Thank you very much, Ms. Beach. Why don't you go first and I'll hand out your statement.
Thank you. My name is Amanda Beach, and I'm a resident of Logan Square. And I'm urging you not to allow the development of 150 studios and 1-bedroom units at 2525 North Kinsey. This type of development is wasteful and insulting to the families that have called this neighborhood home for generations. The level of rampant gentrification has already caused a mass exodus of working-class families. It is reckless and short-sighted to allow more studios, 1-bedrooms, to be built while so many are under development and unoccupied. Vacancy rates are not an issue, and the people you are building the apartments for, white, single, and well-earning, are not going to stay in the neighborhood forever. When they're tired of stainless steel bars and $12 cocktails out of mason jars, they'll move off to some suburb, or maybe out west where the real Peter Pans go. Logan Square is and always has been a family neighborhood with a proud and long history of being working class. Don't build more housing for people who aren't going to give back to their community. We send our kids to our neighborhood schools. We put our money into as many local businesses as we can, and we love it here. Build housing for the future and build for families and build for the working class. Revitalization is the answer. Further cultural erosion and gentrification is not. This is not me as a mother railing against the childless and unmarried. I am not intentionally displaying any sort of drawbridge syndrome. I feel that Chicago is a place where, at least historically, everyone belongs. And I feel we are unfortunate to occupy a time we were short-sighted in economic policy, erodes communities, and history. For example, Humboldt Park had the highest homeownership rates by Puerto Ricans before the market crash, and now those properties are owned and leased by a host of condo-flipping, stainless steel installing investors. These developers, venture capitalists, and Wall Street landlords don't care about a generation of the future. Like any other venture capitalist, they're barely glaring 7 years into the future. If you want to talk trends, let's talk long-term value. The best long-term investment you can make is into a person that is going to stay and grow with your community. It is as though we have all developed amnesia in regards to the trend of white flight. Let us not focus on class, but instead community. Let us explore the success of generational neighborhoods, and let us build for everyone. There is a more sustainable solution to our past and our future than a revolving door of single occupancy for above market rate. Let us stay, let us revitalize, and let us build together. Coming from the San Francisco Bay Area to Chicago, I am a displaced person. I did everything I was told I was to do to grow where I was planted. I worked my elections, gave back to my schools, and I was still considered disposable because I could never make market rate without sacrificing an essential need. There is no reason to inflame a market that is already so predatory. Please, the CTA is a steward of equality for the city of Chicago. I am not afraid of the creative element gentrifying Logan Square. I am in fact terrified of gentrification removing the creative element. We have a vibrant and functional community of musicians and artists from all backgrounds working together. Let's not lose Logan like we lost Maxwell Street. Community and culture before capitalism. We should preserve and protect. I ask you to look at the research and hear the history and understand that there are more equitable solutions, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Beach. Sir, you can go next.
Switching gears, my comments are mostly just about service, red line service, and I've just got like a laundry list. Took a day off of work to come here, so. Out of curiosity, several years ago, we asked about why there was no train arrival board or departure board on the platform at Howard. Never really got a good answer to that. There's one when you get out of the platform upstairs. There's one down for the commuters in the at the bus shelter. Rush hours, 7:45, probably till 9. I ride right around 8-ish. Total debacle. A-B stops during the morning rush or evening rush. Perhaps that would be a way to move the trains. We have
Is this at the Howard line as well?
Howard line, yeah.
It's 7:45 to 9.
So, yeah, I go 7:45 to 8, anywhere in there I get on. I tried getting the purple. Someone had a good idea here, and I don't know, they're probably not working. They got fired. I have no idea. It was a good idea. They ran something called an Addison Express, or maybe the conductor was just calling that. Some of you remember a couple years ago, They ran an express red line from Howard to Addison to alleviate the crowding then at Belmont and Fullerton. So basically, it would be an empty train coming through to pick up your loads at Addison, Belmont, Fullerton, thus alleviating all the crowding that goes on. Great idea. Why it gave it up, I don't know. You could put one of those in between the purples going out. One or two every in between. Fantastic idea. It went away. I don't know why. Trains often come in when I'm on the red. They come in full of Belmont and Fullerton, packed. No one's getting on at Belmont. No one's getting on at Fullerton. Then another Brown comes in for a connection. Why the operators are waiting to then close the doors on the people that are transferring from the Brown? No clue. It's a slap in the face to the folks on the Belmont, at Belmont and Fullerton, not to mention North and Clark, Clark and Division. I mean, there's no connections there, but no one's getting on during these peak times. I don't know if any of you ride the red during rush, daily. I see one nod. I know you probably don't want to. I have to get to work. Terrible. Anyway, your operator's yelling, trains immediately following. Of course, it's a 24-hour line. We don't need to hear the banter. Step in, use all doors. It's just shouting banter, and it's wasting more time. Another thing, escalator at Chicago and State, it was out about a year ago. It took we found out about 6 months to figure out what the problem was. We found out after calling. We were told, I don't know what the reason for the 6 month was, but I think it was some manpower issue, supposedly. Your crew guy didn't have enough crews. Then it became a part issue. You started ordering the part that was missing. It was a machine part. It had to come from Germany. Why? There's no machine shops here in Chicago. So basically, Chicago and State, your tourists coming in, no escalator. The morning commute, evening commute, people sharing one stairwell. Not good. So there's no machine shops here in Chicago that could have made that part for the escalator. Somehow I doubt it. Your customer service folks, when you call in, no clues as to who's in charge of your communication center, who's in charge of your red line. Basically, they're phone message takers. That they're called customer service, they're not given much. You try contacting management, hidden from your customer base, basically. It goes all the way from the top down. I've called, I do get calls back occasionally, but it's pushed down to a level, down. Your folks are polite, they call back. They listen like you guys are listening,
Right.
and I appreciate that.
But you said when they call back, they don't have the information to share with you regarding your issue?
Sometimes they're completely oblivious of why the call was, what did you want? That's when I was told to call you. I've had that several times. What
But
was
not
your...
given the reason for why they needed to return.
Yeah, so that's one thing. Then they'll listen like I'm talking, and then they'll give me the defensive, I'm not gonna start that. Called one of the Red Line managers' offices directly, got a very nice secretary. I'm not gonna mention who that was. Wanted him to take 5 minutes out of his day to listen to some of this. Pushed it back down, You guys don't want to hear it. The president doesn't want to hear it. None of you folks want to hear it.
Well, no, I wouldn't say we don't want to hear it. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
The board is here to hear it. And
Right, and not everyone can take a day off of work and spend a day here.
Yeah.
Which gets me to, I'm going to lead into this. This gentleman was nice the last time I came to the last board meeting. I've never come to one before. Anyway, the agenda said public minutes or public comments on the agenda. I showed up, and he said, oh, there's one commenter last month. He probably remembers me.
Oh, I do, sir.
I'm sorry? Yeah.
Yeah, I remember, sure.
So he says, well, go sit down, there's a procedure or something. But on the public comment notice or the public notice, it doesn't say there should be an asterisk or something. Please see procedure, anything. So basically I was told, no, come back another time. So it's 2 visits I'm coming here. I understand you have limits of time. I appreciate you giving me an extra minute or 2 here today. There should be an asterisk or something. If you go all the way to the bottom of the website, the very last thing says public comment procedure or something. Who in the heck is gonna go all the way down a page when you're looking for public meeting dates and the agenda to someone who's never been to one? So I know you don't want a lot of public here, I understand that, and you guys have an agenda. But anyway, I just think that needs to get clear for people that don't know. But I appreciate him to let me know, and he went and copied the thing for me while I was here, but it was a wasted day for me there.
Excuse me, Chairman, how, would you like
Yeah, I
to
want to.
just continue on?
Yeah.
That's fine then. Go right ahead, sir.
Your Purple Line coming into Howard from South Boulevard, your, what do you call it, your time tracking system?
Yes.
It hits, the minute you see it when you're standing on a platform at Howard, the minute it's hitting past South Boulevard coming over the ramp into Howard, I don't know if any of you know where that is, it says that the train is basically due, it's at Howard. By the time it even finishes going, the sixth car coming around, it's gone off of your track or everything. So if I'm walking up the stairs at Howard, I'm looking, I say, that train's gone. It's 3 to 4 minutes by the time that train hits the platform, yet it's showing it was on time because it's on the
board?
No, there's no board there. Remember, there's no board at platform, but it's on your tracker.
Right.
It says due when it's gone. It's like it's left for, going downtown now, it's going southbound. So when it's coming in off of South Boulevard into Howard, I'm saying on the mountain there, or whatever you want to call it, the overhill, before it even gets near the platform, basically it's saying it's gone. It's due, and then 30 seconds later, it's gone, as if it picked up. And it's a 3 to 4 minute delay then until it gets to the platform. It's waiting for a red line to clear, it's waiting for a yellow line to clear. So until it's pulling out, the 8:11 train, the 8:11 in the morning, it's a train 5:04, it's hitting the tower, the mountain at 8:11 or whatever. I've taken it several times recently, but it's not leaving, getting to the platform until about 8:14, 8:15. So why is your timing there? It's giving a false, it's looking like you're getting it to the platform on time is what it's doing. So I don't know what the reason is for that, but perhaps your metrics, you have to report purple's on time. Just saying, I don't know.
Okay.
And anyway, it's a distractor for people coming in off from your parking garage and everything else. If I'm looking on my thing, it's showing it's gone. Then I'm going, damn, I missed it. I'm going to hop on a red now. Next thing I know, I'm going to get on a red. The doors are closing. There comes that purple line. So that's why it's not a good thing. It's a miss thing. Okay, just a couple more. Your folks that do the communications on the platforms, the subways, I don't know where that's out of. I don't know what training they receive over public address systems. I gather none. They're speaking in a voice, a conversational voice. When it comes over an intercom, it gets lost, especially in the subway. The reverberation and the speed at which they speak, absolutely crazy. You can go look at any speech pattern of your folks, and then you watch the faces on the people in the subway, and it's like, your attention, please, and then it's, and then everyone's going like this.
Okay.
I'm not kidding.
That's good feedback.
So I'm sure they're not trained in slowing down the speech and then repeating that same thing again, slow, and it's not a conversation. It comes across electronically different. So I think that needs to be incorporated. Talk about safety with overcrowding trains. There was an incident probably 2 weeks ago. A guy was, I know it's a societal problem, but it was someone mentally ill, pushing someone with a broken arm. It became a shoving match. Everyone is basically scared. We were crawling along in the subway. No one has room to move. If you wanted to even take the guy down, there was nowhere to move. I know it's not the total CTA problem, but. And if someone could explain what the difference between a major and a significant delay is, that's kind of one of those. A delay is a delay. Minor, couple minutes, you would assume. What's major and what's significant? Does anyone know?
Yes, I'm sure, and we're going to have someone talk with you and explain that today.
It's
A delay over 10 minutes.
Is
A delay of over 10 minutes considered major or
is
significant?
significant or major?
Yes, both. It's both.
Yeah, but in your online tracking and your Twitters and whatever, it's saying delay, major, minor, but no one knows really what, and it gets back to the same thing. When your trains are delayed, you're getting very speckled information from your conductors who may or may not know. Someone's on the track somewhere, the power shut down. Okay, that happens, everyone understands that, but now what? Everyone's standing on the train, not hearing any update. I mean, it's probably the operator doesn't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
So what do we do? Get off? Are we late to work? Is it going to be a while? You probably don't know at the minute. You're waiting for the fire department, whatever. I understand that. I guess the thing is there's not much oversight going on. For as much as this stuff happens daily, it's like I hate to say it, like a Chinese fire drill. You guys do this daily. You have these delays daily, door problems, unauthorized people on the tracks. I can go on, with all your 5 things that you always tweet out. But it's like whoever's monitoring this stuff isn't reacting in a organized manner. It seems all helter-skelter.
Well, let me tell you what I want to do today. One, I want Dorval to have you talk with a manager who will be able to provide some of the answers. I don't know if what you were reading from, if it's something that Greg could make a copy of so that we could make sure that we're following up. But first of all, let me just thank you for taking 2 days off and spending your time to come down and share it with the board. I mean, the reason that we're board members and we're here is because we do care and we do want to know when there are issues that are going on. But we also want to make sure that you're getting feedback and that the issues are being addressed. Some of them we can address sooner than later, but we should be able to provide you with feedback. I mean, most of the things that you've shared this morning, I think a lot of things we can get on top of and do a better job of. The one that you talked about, communication, you're absolutely right. If you're going through the tunnel and you're saying something and it gets muddled, how can we do a better job of communicating? Do we need to do better training there? The thing that you talked about, major or significant delay, do we need to include in our messaging that, hey, the delay is 10 minutes, 15 minutes, or 30 minutes or longer? So again, all of those are things that, again, great feedback. Appreciate you coming down. I'm going to have Dorval have someone who works with you. You've got Greg's number. I read everything that comes to me in terms of the mail, so if you don't feel as though the staff is being responsive, I don't want you to have to take time off again, but if you feel the need to, please do. But I would hope going forward that we would have folks who could work with you to address some of the concerns that you've raised here this morning.
Okay, I appreciate that,
Yeah.
and like I say, if you get consideration to doing something with your skip stops in the morning,
Yep.
or that Addison train again, stuck in the middle of the road.
Yeah, I wrote down here, make sure we get
Someone-
someone from rail operations to talk with you and to look at what we were doing in the past and see why we stopped doing it and how we can address it. So again, there were a host of issues from communications to
Okay,
rail operation. I mean, there were a whole host of issues, so I'm sure there's going to be more than one person that Dorval needs to pull together to work with you through these
Yeah,
issues.
I'm going to have my head of transit operations and my chief planning officer, Don Bonds and Mike Connolly, meet with him initially.
Okay, and I
to
think
start to
Kevin
work
has-
through that.
Yeah.
My email address is kirvine@transitchicago.com, so just my first initial, Irvine, at transitchicago.com. Please feel free to CC me on your correspondence.
And you have mine, which can get to the chairman within 2 minutes. And I'd like to say a couple things. In terms of your question about Gay's notes, we don't need Tabitha's transcript.
Oh,
Will be
she's-
extremely
okay.
accurate. It'll have
Perfect.
everything
Okay.
in there. I want to say to Ms. Beach, because she and I spoke a lot yesterday, we do limit the conversations to 3 or 4 minutes, and I can see you saying that you abided by the rule and you read it really quickly to get into 3 minutes. However, the gentleman came after you, had a whole number of other issues that were longer, and the chairman made the decision to allow him to keep speaking. And that was why I don't want you to think that
Yeah.
I enforced a rule on you that we did not enforce.
And I
on you.
want to speak to your issue. One, because we've gotten a lot of comments regarding the 2025 Ketsy property. I've talked with staff about it. I don't expect this to come to the board anytime soon. But what I would encourage you to do is the neighbors who have been speaking out about this issue, please make sure you get to the alderman. Please continue to work with the local alderman because, again, when it comes to development, and I was a former alderman, I served and represent the 17th Ward. Aldermen have a lot to say about the zoning. They have a lot to say about what gets built. I appreciate your letter. You were direct, straight to the point. So again, you know, the same advocacy that you've shown and those who are here representing your position have shown in terms of contacting the CTA. Please continue to contact the local aldermen in that ward, work with them. But I was told by staff, we don't expect to see this in the next few months coming before the board, but also appreciate you taking time to come down today as well and to share your thoughts and comments regarding this property at 2525 Kedzie. Thank you. Thank both of you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you both. And that concludes our public comment section of today's meeting, sir.
All right, thanks, Greg. The next order of business today is the approval of the November board minutes. The minutes were previously distributed. Any comments? Hearing none, I now entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the regular board meeting of November 14, 2018.
Second. Moved and seconded. Call the roll. Reverend Miller.
Yes.
Ms. Irvine.
Yes.
Ms. Alvarez-Rosales.
I'll abstain, I wasn't here.
That's right. Director Silva.
Yes.
Director Youngblood.
Yes.
Chairman Peterson.
Yes.
The minutes are approved with 5 yes votes and 1 abstention. Ms. Alvarez-Rosales.
Thanks, Greg. The next agenda item is executive session. It is my understanding that there will be no executive session this morning, Karen?
That's correct, Chairman.
All right. Thank you, Karen. The next order of business today are board matters. I first entertain a motion to approve a resolution setting the dates of the July, October, and November 2019 Transit Board regular meetings and the times of March and June of 2019 meetings.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Reverend Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Irvine.
Yes.
Ms. Alvarez-Rosales.
Yes.
Mr. Silva.
Yes.
Mr. Youngblood.
Yes.
Chairman Peterson.
Yes.
That motion regarding the dates is approved with 6 yes votes.
Thanks, Greg. The next order of business today is item 5B. May I have a motion to approve an ordinance appointing a trustee of the Board of Trustees of the Retirement Plan for the Chicago Transit Authority employees?
So moved.
Second.
Seconded. Reverend Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Irvine.
Yes.
Ms. Alvarez-Rosales.
Yes.
Mr. Silva.
Yes.
Mr. Youngblood.
Yes.
Chairman Peterson.
Yes.
That motion is approved with 6 yes votes.
Thanks, Greg. The next order of business today is Board Agenda Item 5C. May I have a motion to approve an ordinance appointing a trustee to the Board of Trustees of Chicago Transit Authority Retiree Health Care Trust?
So moved. Second.
And seconded. Reverend Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Irvine.
Yes.
Ms. Alvarez-Rosales.
Yes.
Mr. Silva.
Yes.
Mr. Youngblood.
Yes.
Chairman Peterson.
Yes.
That motion is approved with 6 yes votes.
Thanks, Greg. The next order of business today is Agenda Item Number 5A, a resolution honoring Mr. Walter H. Clark, a former chairman of Chicago Transit Board. Greg?
Yes. Mr. Clark had been named to the board by, appointed chairman by then Mayor Washington, who recently passed away, and so we'll now read the resolution honoring the life of Walter H. Clark, former chairman of the Chicago Transit Board. Whereas Walter H. Clark was born in Athens, Georgia on June 5, 1928 to his parents, John Q. Clark and Beulah Hill Clark. And whereas Mr. Clark's family moved to Carbondale, Illinois, and Clark, along with his brother, John Q. Clark, Jr., attended Attucks Community High School in Carbondale, where he and his brother played on the 1943 Southern Illinois Conference of Colored High Schools Tournament Championship basketball team, coached by their father. And whereas after high school, Clark and his brother moved to California and attended Compton Junior College, where Clark played on the 1947 National Junior College Championship basketball team. And whereas after attending UCLA for 2 years, Clark transferred to Southern Illinois University for family reasons and earned a degree in accounting in 1951. And whereas Clark briefly worked as a teller at a black-owned savings and loan in Chicago after graduation before serving in the Korean War. And whereas upon his return from Korea in 1955, Clark started a 30-year career at First Federal Savings and Loan Association as the organization's first African-American employee, where he rose from accounting clerk to executive vice president and earned a seat on the board of directors. And whereas Clark married Juanita Dillard in 1957, and they had 2 children, Hilton Pierre and Juanine Charisse. And whereas in 1958, Clark earned an MBA in accounting from DePaul University, and in 1971, First Federal sponsored Clark to attend the Harvard School of Business's Advanced Management Program. And whereas in 1979, Mr. Clark testified before the United States House of Representatives Ways and Means Committee regarding municipal mortgage revenue bonds. And whereas Mr. Clark was named chairman of the U.S. Savings and Loan Peer Group, an association of the largest savings and loan institutions in the country. And whereas Clark became finance chairman of the Harold Washington mayoral campaign in 1982 and 1983. And whereas in 1986, Clark was appointed chairman of the Chicago Transit Board, where he served with distinction and worked to improve the diversity of the workforce and contracting opportunities at CTA. And whereas Mr. Clark was involved in a leadership role in many civic and philanthropic activities, including serving as a charter member of the School of Finance Authority for the Chicago Board of Education, serving as chair of the Mayor's Link Development Committee for the City of Chicago, serving on the board of directors for the College of Business Administration for the University of Illinois at Champaign and Chicago, and chairing the Investment Committee of the Union League Club of Chicago. And whereas Mr. Clark died on November 15th, 2018 at the age of 90, and is survived by his wife, Juanita E. Clark, and son, Hilton P. Clark, and his nephews, Jeffrey Clark and Craig Lambert, his nieces, Bettina Lambert Vigru, Randy Wilson, and Leslie Wilson, and numerous other friends and extended family. And whereas the Transit Board recognizes the positive impact that Walter H. Clark had in both his personal life and professional life, including a substantial contributions to the Chicago Transit Authority, now therefore be it resolved that the Chicago Transit Board hereby celebrates the life of Walter H. Clark and his contributions to the Chicago Transit Authority as chairman of the board. Be it further resolved that the board recognizes former Chairman Clark's further accomplishments in his personal life and professional life. And finally, be it further resolved that the Chicago Transit Authority expresses condolences to Mr. Clark's family and his close friends.
Before I entertain a motion to approve the resolution, let me just thank Dorval for bringing this to my attention. I know Dorval has shared with me that he had known the Clark family for a number of years, and again, shared his obituary with me. And again, I was just blown away by the accomplishments. If you had an opportunity to hear the things that Greg just kind of laid out, you know, we talk about DBE participation, but you can see we're standing on the shoulders of someone who came before us with a board chair who was also very involved in it. So I just wanted to personally thank Dorval for bringing Mr. Clark to my attention, bringing this resolution forward to honor Mr. Clark, because clearly he was a giant in this city and in the African-American community as well. So I just wanted to thank you for that. If I could, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the resolution honoring Mr. Clark.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Reverend Miller.
Yes.
Ms. Irvine.
Yes.
Ms. Alvarez Rosales.
Yes.
Mr. Silva.
Yes.
Mr. Youngblood.
Yes.
Chairman Peterson.
Yes.
That motion honoring Mr. Clark passes with 6 yes votes.
Thanks,
Mr.
Greg.
Chairman.
The next order of business.
Mr. Chairman, just real quick, I just want to say, I want to thank the board for honoring Mr. Clark. To your earlier point, I don't know that I would be sitting in this seat if it wasn't for Mr. Clark. When he was chairman of the CTA board, he allowed me to engage and continue to pursue my career path that gave me the opportunities to work at the highest level of this organization. And that is consistent with the sort of mentoring that he did throughout his career. And while I've known him both personally and professionally, I can tell you that he certainly had an impact on my life and certainly set the direction, particularly around diversity and inclusivity that we all talk about today. So I just want to personally thank you for honoring him, and I know his family will appreciate the recognition. Thank you.
The next order of business is a report from the Committee of Finance, Audit, and Budget. Director Silva.
The Committee on Finance, Audit, and Budget met earlier today. The committee approved the November minutes and reviewed the finance report. The committee also reviewed the following ordinance. An ordinance authorizing Lessee Wilson Yard Development 1, LLC, to sublease to Floral Park Realty Management Incorporated property improved by parking located between Monroe and Wilson Avenues, Chicago, Illinois, Red Line. The committee also reviewed 8 purchase and sales award recommendations. The committee approved the 1 ordinance and all 8 contracts, placed all these items on the omnibus, and recommend the board approval of the omnibus. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Director Silva. May I now have a motion to approve the omnibus as stated by Director Silva?
So moved.
I'll second.
And second by Ms. Alvarez. Reverend Miller.
Yes.
Mr. Irvine.
Yes.
Ms. Alvarez.
Yes.
Mr. Silva.
Yes.
Mr. Youngblood.
Yes.
Chairman Peterson.
Yes.
That motion to approve the omnibus passes with 6 yes votes.
Thanks, Greg. The next order of business is the construction report. Carol.
Good morning. My name is Bill Mooney. I'm the Vice President of Power and Way. Our first project we'll provide an update on today is our East Lake, Milwaukee, Illinois substation upgrade. Since we last spoke with you, Illinois substation has received all of its new traction power and equipment, and we're running on that new equipment there. Here's some examples of the complicated cable network that connects those pieces of equipment from one to the other as it converts the Commonwealth Edison power to our DC system and ultimately feeds it to the network to power our trains, as well as an example of the new personnel stairwell. This project remains on schedule and within budget. At Milwaukee Substation, where we've been having the new traction power equipment for our DC side of the house in place for a while, we have now started transferring over to new AC equipment, including new terminations from Commonwealth Edison. And these two pictures give you an example of the equipment both inside the substation and to the exterior. The transformers, which are in the right picture there, take the power from Commonwealth Edison and step it down to a voltage that ultimately we convert to the 600 we use for our service. The next project I'd like to provide an update on is our Ravenswood Loop signal upgrade project. Since we last talked, we cut over the last of the relay houses at Illinois and gained beneficial use of the signal system. This was a great milestone as a project that we've struggled with for many months to get a handle on. A contractor, as signal jobs are very challenging, and we were able to successfully cut over all 3 signal houses and gain benefit of it. As a Brown Line rider, I can tell you I've noticed a difference in my commute in that corridor as well. And we will be phasing out the slides going forward as we're mostly in decommissioning of the system, the previous system at this point.
So before we move on to the facilities projects, I'd just like to recognize Bill's leadership on this project. This was our first design build signal project, and when I first started reporting to you on this project back in May, as Chief Infrastructure Officer, I was telling you that we were delayed. I'm happy to report that we, as Bill has stated, we have beneficial use, and it's largely due to Bill's leadership on this project. So the first facilities project or station project I wanted to talk to you about was 95th Terminal Improvement Program. So as you know, we're operating out of the South Terminal. We're hard at work on the North Terminal. We will become operational as of December 30th. Keep in mind when I show you pictures that generally they're about 30 days behind. If you'd like to see more recent pictures, I can provide those. But this is a view looking at the new pedestrian bridge that spans 95th Street. It's significantly more completed by this point if you've been by there. But this was a major milestone. We had a full closure of 95th Street in order to put this in. There was press coverage associated with it, and it was a very successful weekend. This is, again, about 20 days old photo, but I think it shows you the level of completion and the exterior. The next station project I wanted to report on was Quincy Loop Station. We are within days of the elevator on both sides becoming operational. Got some pictures here. You can see the walkway that takes you from the elevator to the station. Remember, this is largely an accessibility project, and it's a retrofit on basically an 1895 designed station. So you'll go through this passageway in order to access the main station house. We also did some renovations in the station house. You can see paint. We put down new floors, as well as accessible fare gates and new stairwells. The next station project is the Garfield Green Station renovation. This is also rapidly reaching substantial completion. It's on track, both on schedule and on budget, to reach substantial completion by January 8th. Here's a photo of the new escalator that's going in on the west side. And here's a view of the new canopies that are being installed. These are essentially complete. We also did a new platform topping slab here so that the platform, as well as the tactile edge, is completely renewed and is brand new. And then the last station project is the Belmont and Jefferson Park station improvements. These are some photos of Jefferson Park. So we did a new canopy here. It's a translucent canopy, so it adds a lot of light to the feeling of the station. We are actually now, you see temp lights in this photo, but we have the permanent lighting in. So that is complete on the rail station side. Construction continues on the bus terminal there. It's a very busy bus terminal for us, and that's not scheduled to be complete until July 8th.
Getting into advanced contract, RPM advanced contracts, we've talked about those briefly. The work on the property demolition, that's the second of two contracts, continues on time and on budget. No substantial issues. RPM advanced utility work, again, mostly taking above ground utilities that are up on top of high poles in the alleys and public spaces adjacent to the existing structure and putting them, at least key larger ones, underground so they're not in conflict with potential structure. That work continues on time and on budget as well, no substantial issues. We've had a good partnership working with all the utilities and look forward to wrapping that up in the middle of next year. This is demolition of, at Bryn Mawr. We have done some demolition on the north side. This actually, on the northern part of this project, on the Lawrence-Bryn Mawr section, most of the demolition has been south in the area of the bypass. RPM Broadway substation continues. We're not quite to the stage that Bill described with the substations that Power and Way and infrastructure are doing. We're still at the stage of completing the exterior renovations and of doing miscellaneous improvements to the inside of the building to accept new equipment, as well as testing the equipment you saw photos of in Bill's report. These are miscellaneous components of what will be the cabling system at the substation. But the project continues on time. The schedule has had some impacts due to discovered conditions, environmental conditions up there, but the contractor is working to recover. And we don't expect any impact to the larger project in any case.
All right. Carol, Bill, Juan, and Chris, thank you. In fact, as I've got some thoughts about how we kind of push this out. I mean, it's great. I think the board gets these updates. Do we push these, some of these updates out to the community? We might want to think about it. And I was looking, I see Brian in the back, just kind of sharing this with the community as well. I mean, sometimes you hear about the disruption, maybe as part of our social media, getting the word out, what's going on, but we can talk about it a little later. But again, let me just thank, again, Carol, Bill, Juan, and Chris for these updates. I mean, it helps. We approve a lot of contracts, and it really helps to see the work from its inception to its conclusion. It's just great to get those kind of updates. So, again, thank you. Greg, is there any new business that come before the board?
There's none, sir. However, Director Irvine wants to say something.
Okay.
I wanted to recognize President Carter and your team for the decision you made on the insurance for transgender employees, and I really appreciate CTA recognizing and supporting its transgender employees and recognizing the need to make a change when you did. Thank you.
And Dorval will say this. Karen walked in the room. I think Dorval and I were sitting there. Mentioned we had this. I think it took all of 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute. So I just want you to know that as soon as Karen brought this to our attention, it didn't take more than a couple of minutes to say, guess what, it's the right thing to do and to move forward on the issue. Let me also say before we adjourn, let me just wish everyone happy holidays with a healthy and a prosperous new year. I will see you, the board will see you in January of 2019. It's amazing how fast this year has gone by, but it's been a good year, and we're looking forward to some exciting things happening in 2019. With no further business to come before the board, may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you.